The Tampa Bay Lightning snapped their home win streak in a tough way, but the Lightning lines and roster might be set for the rest of the season. We'll preview the rest of the way for the Tampa Bay Lightning here on episode of Locked On Lightning.
You're Locked On Lightning, your daily podcast on the Tampa Bay Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Josh Sperber, thanking all of you for tuning in for another episode of Locked On Lightning and making Locked On Lightning your first listen every day. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And if your team is the Tampa Bay Lightning, then this is the show for you. And on Saturday, it was not the game for the Tampa Bay Lightning. They did outshoot the Bruins in every period, except for the second, 26-25. The total shots on goal favored the Lightning. Face-off percentage favored the Lightning. They had more power plays, but they lost 4-0 in what was just a tough performance for the Tampa Bay Lightning. It was the first time in 7 games they had lost at home. It was the first time in about 2 years that they had been shut out at home, and the second time this season, and second in 2025, that they have been shut out at home. Their last shutout against the Detroit Red Wings back in January. After that, the Lightning went on a pretty solid run. So they're hoping that that is going to be what comes next. But this was just a case of defense not working for the Tampa Bay Lightning. I think a big part of that was the loss of Victor Hedman. Hedman was skating with the Tampa Bay Lightning during pregame warmups, but came off the ice a little bit early and did not end up playing in the loss against the Bruins. 2 days off in between the Lightning's road trip, beginning on Tuesday against Carolina. They had a practice later on Monday, and we'll try and get you information on Victor Hedman's hopeful return from injury, but you can certainly tell that the Lightning were missing Victor Hedman once again. The Sabres made enough mistakes and let the Lightning back into games in a lot of situations. The Bruins did not. Jeremy Swayman was great in the net, and the Lightning just couldn't hold on to the puck on a consistent basis. According to Brandon Hagel, it really just was not a case of the Lightning bringing their best effort to the ice against the Boston Bruins on Saturday afternoon.
Pretty much 3/4, almost 100% of the games, you can look in our room and say we gave our best effort. Maybe the execution wasn't there, or just the little things weren't there, and kind of lost it. But tonight it just wasn't us. So I think a page like this to turn is pretty simple. When you're not at your best and know that you're not even close to your best, it's a pretty easy page to turn and learn from it, because I think it was a good. I mean, listen, games like that, and when you get outworked like that, I think you can definitely learn from that as a group. That this league's not easy to win, and it doesn't matter who's on the other team and what faces they have. But at the end of the day, we have a really good hockey team in here, and we all know that. We just know it wasn't our night tonight in a lot of aspects of the game, but it's going to happen. And, quicker we can turn the page on it, better for the group.
I mean, you might as well have called Brandon Hagel's post-game press conference just turn the page, because I think he said that phrase about 9 times in the 5 minutes that media members were asking him questions. And I mean, I think that's the only way that you can look at a game like this. This was just probably the worst game the Lightning have played all season. It really stinks that it has to come against a divisional opponent, especially when the Lightning are so close. At the start of that game, they were in striking distance of first place. Florida got a win over the weekend as well, and now the Lightning, with a game in hand against the Panthers, are back to being 5 points down. So the Lightning are still in a good place in the division, where losing against a divisional team didn't hurt them that badly. They still have a 7-point lead with one game played more than the Ottawa Senators at this point. And, it's just sometimes games like this happen. And you got to shake them off, and you got to keep pushing forward. I know Brandon Hagel said it, and I think it was certainly alluded to by a couple of the other guys in the room post game. But I think my favorite Brandon Hagel quote from the press conference after the game on Saturday was that I think everyone in this room knows that wasn't Lightning hockey. I certainly was wondering what I was seeing for a lot of that game. Just, the passing did not look good for Tampa Bay. It just was sloppy play, and it just didn't seem like the Lightning came ready for that game. They didn't learn the lesson against Buffalo. I know that I said, and I know that, John Cooper even said something along the lines of they got out of Buffalo kind of in a lucky way almost. That was just not their best game against the Sabres. And then they come out and put a similar effort against a better team than the Sabres, and they paid for it. That's just basically what happened to the Lightning. And this just needs to be a game that the Lightning can write off and they can move on. They can move on from. They've got the Bruins again in a week. Saturday the 15th, Lightning Bruins in Boston. And especially after that 4-0 loss, the Lightning need to redeem themselves and take that win over the Bruins. You want to collect as many of the season series against divisional opponents as you can. And the Lightning have now lost 2 of 3 games against the Boston Bruins. And that just doesn't sit right to me. This is a team that you think the Lightning are better than, and then the Lightning come in the day after the Bruins trade their captain, one of the best players in franchise history, for a second-round pick, and it's the Bruins that come out and beat Tampa in Tampa 4-0. That just, that can't sit right to you if you're a Lightning fan. And I imagine it's the same way if you're a Lightning player or coach right now, because it certainly did not look like a happy locker room after that loss to Boston. That just, it was what you expected from a team that lost to a team that, frankly, they shouldn't have. Again, the Lightning, by just about every metric this season, except for head-to-head wins, are a better team than the Boston Bruins right now. I don't think that there are too many people around the NHL that are going to disagree with me when I say that. I don't think that any of you guys are going to disagree with me when I say that. But the Bruins just caught them on a bad night. And I think, again, not having Victor Hedman, certainly a problem. The Lightning definitely need him back if they're going to contend. I mentioned it on Thursday's episode. I don't think the Lightning can contend without Victor Hedman. I think that he is probably the most central player on defense to Tampa Bay's playoff hopes. I think Nikita Kucherov might be number one in terms of highest importance on the Lightning roster, but I think that can be argued for Victor Hedman as well. But this is just a game that the Lightning are going to have to shake off, plain and simple. The key, a lot of coaches in just about every sport are going to tell their players to have a short memory after games like this, and that's just what the Lightning need to do. They've got a couple of big games coming up this week. The Hurricanes and Bruins highlight a tough road series. Hopefully they can get some revenge on the Flyers on the 13th before the St. Paddy's Day tilt at home, the only remaining home game in the next couple of weeks for the Lightning, as they play 6 of their next 7 away from Amalie Arena. And I think these kind of road trips can certainly be a test for, I don't want to say struggling teams, but teams coming off of a tough loss and a game in which they struggled. Because Hedman's injury or not, I wouldn't call the Lightning a struggling team right now. They're playing very good hockey, just they didn't do that on Saturday against Boston. plain and simple. And that's just, as Brandon Hagel said, a time for the Lightning to turn the page and focus on the road trip coming up for Tampa Bay. But the one thing that I can say that I like about Tampa Bay Lightning are the lines that they made and kept almost the same for the last 2 games since Oliver Bjorkstrand and Yanni Gourde were traded to the Tampa Bay Lightning from the Seattle Kraken. In our next segment, we'll break down the Lightning lines and talk about why they should stay put for the remainder of the 2024-25 NHL season. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller longer. Personally, I love the no shells variety. It's the perfect grab-and-go snack for busy days. Whether I'm snacking at my desk, on a road trip, or just need a quick protein boost, they're always my go-to. And if you love cracking open every shell for that satisfying crunch, the in-shell options are a classic favorite. So get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. So, one thing that I can say I like about the Tampa Bay Lightning right now is the way that they've organized their lines. And I don't mean defensively because, one, the main piece of those defensive lines, Victor Hedman, team captain, currently injured. Unclear if he'll be back for Tuesday in Carolina, though that is the goal for the Lightning captain. He has led the Lightning defense with pretty consistent lines all season. Darren Radish has usually been the man to plug in on the first line when Hedman or Moser have been hurt. McDonough and Chernak have stayed the line 2 pair for almost the entire season. And Emil Lilleberg has worked mostly with Nick Perbix on the third line, sometimes switching in a couple players from the Syracuse Crunch. And occasionally Darren Radish makes an appearance on that third line for Tampa. But those defensive lines for the Lightning have remained the same. The offensive lines naturally have changed a little bit. There have been some players up and down from AHL Syracuse. Even the players that have been with the Lightning over the course of the entire season have moved up and down those Lightning lines. And it, for the most part, has varied from game to game. The Lightning have played now 2 games since the trade deadline, a 6-5 win against the Buffalo Sabres and a 4-0 loss to the Boston Bruins, with offensive lines that looked uncharacteristically identical over the last 2 games. The first line of forwards has remained the same, barring injuries this season. Brandon Hagel and Anthony Cirelli have continued to be connected on that second line. And Nick Paul has been probably the number 2 player on that second line, with Connor Geekie now in AHL Syracuse. But I really like him on that line there. I think Paul or Geekie is the right wing on a Hagel-Cirelli line is just the perfect recipe, because they're both similar players in that they have strong offensive capabilities, but they're power forwards. They're going to deck you. They're going to come after, they can come after everyone, and they can, go toe to toe with just about any player in the league. Geekie was one of the Lightning leaders in hits in his 50 games, and Nick Paul is certainly up there and shown unbelievable two-way characteristics for the Tampa Bay Lightning. And I think that with those new trades and the call-ups and guys sent down, I think it's a no-brainer that Nick Paul is a top 6 forward for the Tampa Bay Lightning right now, because he absolutely is in just about every sense of the word. Among Lightning players, just on the Lightning, if you look at the entirety of the season, Oliver Bjorkstrand is 3 points ahead of Nick Paul, but among players who have been on the Lightning the entire season, if you only count the 1 point that Bjorkstrand has for the Bolts right now, Nick Paul would be 7th among Tampa Bay Lightning players in points. He is 6th on the Bolts in goals, one away from becoming another 20-plus goal scorer for Tampa Bay. And he has 16 assists, a plus-minus of plus 10 as well. And Nick Paul has certainly been a two-way threat for the Tampa Bay Lightning the entirety of the games this season. So I think it's great having him up with Hagel and Cirelli. I think that they work really well together. I did like having Paul really anchor that third line when Connor Geekie was up, and I think that in the future that might be something the Lightning go back to. But as we're going to talk about in the next segment, I don't think that the Lightning are going to see Connor Geekie for the rest of the season. I just don't know if there's going to be any room for them on their current roster. And a big part of that is because that third line has already looked pretty solid together. And, you know, that's what we're going to talk about next. So the two guys in the trade, Oliver Bjorkstrand, Yanni Gourde, coming from the Seattle Kraken. I love that they immediately get put on the same line. I think that's seems like a no-brainer coaching decision. Obviously, Lightning fans are blessed with a coach that makes great decisions a lot of the time. John Cooper's one of the best in the NHL. And it paid off. I mean, instantly against the Sabres, Gourde ends up redirecting a puck towards Ollie Bjorkstrand for the winning goal against Buffalo. And, already showed that one paid off. And I think having Gonzalez, a guy who can play both wings, because that was the only change in the Lightning's offensive line over the weekend. They had against the Sabres on Thursday, Gonzalez was the left wing, Bjorkstrand was the right wing, Gourde was the center on the Lightning's third line. Against the Bruins, Gonzalez was the right wing, Bjorkstrand was the left wing, and Gourde was the center. And honestly, I think I like the fact that Bjorkstrand and Gonzalez are kind of interchangeable on that left wing and right wing. I know Bjorkstrand is more of a natural right wing. I believe Gonzalez typically is too. If you look on the Tampa Bay Lightning roster, Gonzalez is actually listed as a center. So again, really just another guy who could play anywhere. And I think that is another reason that he's on the team ahead of Connor Geekie right now, because Geekie hasn't played left wing this season. It's been center and right wing for him, and Gonzalez has been able to play anywhere on the ice. Down the road, Geekie might end up being a better player than Gonzalez, but right now, Gage has certainly earned his spot on that Lightning roster. And I think that having him on those lines with Bjorkstrand and Gourde, it gives kind of a two-way opportunity for leadership and confidence, because you have Gonzalez, who's been around the Lightning a lot more recently than those guys, Bjorkstrand and Gourde. So he can kind of give them the ropes about Tampa a little bit. If we're just talking about, interline chemistry, camaraderie, he can kind of help them get acclimated, or in Gourde's case, reacclimated to Tampa Bay, while they can both give him valuable veteran leadership. And having a 24-year-old on a line with two players who have been in the league for 10 or so years can only be a good thing for that young player. And I think that Gonzalez, who has already been playing very well after his latest call-up, put on a line with two solid NHL veterans, I think that can only be good for him. So I really like having him with those two experienced players that are new to the Tampa Bay Lightning. And the fourth line, Luke Glendening, Mitchell Chaffee, Zemgus Girgensons. Chaffee is just a warrior. I really like the way he's played for the Lightning this season. Girgensons, solid defender at either wing, and Glendening, just a true face-off artist. And really a glue guy for this Tampa Bay Lightning team. He's just a good guy to have around the locker room, and just a nice veteran's presence on the ice for Tampa Bay. That fourth line has held it down defensively for the most part this season, but Mitchell Chaffee has been a surprising bonus for the Lightning on the offensive side of the puck, really breaking out with 12 goals and 5 assists, 17 points in 57 games, all career highs for the undrafted free agent from Michigan in Mitchell Chaffee. And I think he really can step up and be the offensive leader on that third line, because he has more goals than Girgensons and Glendening have points combined for the rest of their games. And that is, or the rest of the season. And Girgensons is definitely more of a defensive-minded forward. Glendening is on there to take face-offs and play defense, which he does incredibly. But the Lightning seem to score or win when Glendening does score as well. So that's obviously something that you're trying to have. But I like the way that fourth line is. So, you know, whether you can move guys around the wings, but I think the Lightning have their 12 forwards set in the correct order for the rest of the NHL season. But there are still some key players in the Tampa Bay Lightning minor league system. The trade deadline is passed, and there might not be any more roster moves for the Tampa Bay Lightning in the 2024-2025 season. And we'll talk about why when we return. Looking to optimize your nutrition this year? Factor makes eating well easy with chef-prepared, dietitian-approved meals that are fresh, never frozen, and ready to heat and eat in just 2 minutes. With 40 options across 8 dietary preferences every week, you can customize your meals to fit your lifestyle, whether it's Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, or Keto. Plus, Factor even offers wholesome smoothies, breakfasts, and grab-and-go snacks to keep you fueled all day long. I love how Factor takes the stress out of meal planning. I recently tried their Protein Plus meals, and they were packed with flavor and kept me full throughout the day. The convenience is unbeatable. No prep, no mess, just great food in minutes. Eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/LockedOnNHL 50 off and use the code LockedOnNHL 50 off to get 50% off of your first box plus free shipping. That's code LockedOnNHL, LOCKEDON NHL, 50 off at factormeals.com/LockedOnNHL 50 off to get 50% off plus free shipping off your first box. So, Tampa Bay Lightning have their lines set. That seems to be the case after just 2 good-looking lines or days of lines in a row. Not often that John Cooper repeats his forward lines exactly, even just with one change that he had from Thursday to Saturday at Amalie Arena. I think it's a good thing that at this point the Lightning can just set it and forget it in terms of lines. They may not do that for the rest of the season, but I'm not a coach, so that would make sense. But as I mentioned, certainly like the way the Lightning's lines look, but what it also could mean for Tampa Bay is that we might not see anyone else from their minor league roster. And the Lightning are certainly going to have to make some decisions in the offseason about who from the minor league roster they're going to need to see. And there might be a couple of players that are looking a little bit vulnerable once the offseason rolls around in a couple of months. And we're going to take a look at some of the Lightning's expiring contracts that will have to make a decision on in 2025. Starting on the offense, really just 2 for this year. Are Yanni Gourde and Luke Glendening. Everyone else is locked up at least until 26-27. 27-28 is certainly going to be a tougher year with Nikita Kucherov and Zemgus Girgensons, as well as J.J. Moser on the free agency block. But right now, Yanni Gourde, Luke Glendening are 2 players that are unrestricted free agents next year, along with Nick Perbix and Jonas Johansson. Now, a couple of those, I think the Johansson can be re-signed for cheap. Perbix might need to be a decision made, and Yanni Gourde is someone that Julien Brisebois already said that he was planning on extending. Said that about both Gourde and Bjorkstrand in the press conference immediately following the deadline deal that sent Bjorkstrand and Gourde back to the Lightning. So I think that Gourde can be re-signed. Obviously, he's well-liked in Tampa, and he likes it here. But Luke Glendening is definitely a trickier case because his age is certainly a factor. I think Gourde is also Gourde's 33. Glendening is currently 35. So those are two guys that might even be in decision about playing next year, though they certainly have not shown signs of slowing down. But it could be one or both of those guys gone to make room for some of the younger guys that the Lightning have on their roster, because you can't keep guys like Dylan Duke and Connor Geekie down in AHL Syracuse for that long. And you just got to think that within the next couple of years, some of these Lightning players are not going to come back. I mean, you'll see Zemgus Girgensons is someone who is not going to come back after his contract ends, and the Lightning might even make some moves to use him as to get him to replace him with one of those rookies. Gage Gonzalez is even a restricted free agent after this year. I think he should be able to come back for Tampa Bay. I think that that is definitely a possibility, and I think that the way he has been playing is certainly something that some of the Lightning should bring back. I think that should be a no-brainer. But the big questions are Gourde, Glendening, and on defense, Nick Perbix. Because Perbix has been solid on the third-line defense for the Lightning, but I think even though he's a bit younger than Darren Radish is locked up for another season, cheaper, and frankly, I think better value than Nick Perbix. There's a reason that it's been Radish going up to the first line when there's been an injury there rather than Perbix for the most part. So I think that if the Lightning are going to have to lose those three guys to be replaced by some call-ups after the season, then Perbix might have to come back, because if you're looking at Glendening, Gourde, I do think is going to stay, so we'll go to 2. But Glendening and Perbix as two guys that just might not come back in the offseason. You look at Syracuse's roster, and I think that there are two easy replacements to come up in Connor Geekie and Max Crozier, maybe Declan Carlisle as well. But one of those two guys are certainly good options on defense, and I think those are possibilities that Perbix just walks at the end of the season. And, again, certainly haven't heard any rumblings that Luke Glendening is going to retire, but at 35, 36 years old, it's something that you're going to have to start thinking about. But Glendening is someone that also could come back for cheap. The combined salaries of Glendening and Perbix are under $2 million a year. So it's not cheap to bring them back, but it could be the time for the Lightning to start looking at those rookies and having those two guys move on after the season. And you still have another year of Isaac Howard in college, but the way he has been playing in Michigan State, the first team all Big Ten, I mean, just about every accolade you could think of in college hockey, Hobie Baker finalist. I mean, he's someone you're going to want to make room for, and he's eligible officially to make the Lightning in another year. He could still make the team coming out of preseason. I mean, that's a possibility. Something that I think we're going to be talking about a lot of in the offseason is where Isaac Howard is going to end up. But he's someone that you're going to have to make room for at some point. And the Lightning are going to have some tough decisions. They've got some non-roster guys that they might want to pull up. But I think that we might not see Perbix or Glendening back next season as the Lightning try to make way for some of their rookies. And it could be just meeting the axe for some of the vets. And that is really the business of sports for you. Glendening, Perbix, they've both been solid soldiers for the Tampa Bay Lightning. Certainly guys that you don't want to see losing. But it might be necessary for the Tampa Bay Lightning. And the one thing, though, I'm going to leave you guys with is what the Lightning need to do as they get ready for this big road trip. And that is just lock in and, as Ryan McDonough says, become road warriors.
Schedule for what it is here, and try to find a way to get some points during this road trip and get away from home and get that road warrior mentality going.
I just really like that he said that after a tough loss against Boston. And I think it'd be a good way to end today's show, because that is next for the Lightning. Tomorrow we'll talk about the Carolina Hurricanes game coming up and a whole lot more. Until then, my name is Josh Sperber, and I want to thank all of you for tuning in and making Locked On Lightning your first listen every day. Now, for your second listen, check out the Locked On NHL podcast, bringing you the daily league-wide stories that matter with the local coverage you love from Locked On. Find Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. And wherever you found this podcast today, please give us a like, a follow, and a subscribe. I really appreciate your guys' support as we do the show for you. So thank you again for tuning in to Locked On Lightning. Have a great week, and go Bolts.